You can get much farther with a kind word and a gun than you can with a kind word alone. These are the words of the notorious mob boss Al Capone, one of the first gangsters. Before his time of bootlegging during Prohibition, however, there were other forms of early gangsterism in America. Prohibition had impacted the country in many different ways. Organized crime was unarguably the biggest of its effects, but prior to gangs of bootleggers, prostitution was the larger form of crime in the U.S. for the time being. The emergence of sexually explicit ideals came about with the first clubs and brothels during the Roaring Twenties. Jazz was looked on as corrupt and unsophisticated, and was often played in these clubs. Prostitution became illegal in most places in America because Helen Gillette, a New York lady, was once murdered by one of her customers. However, the illegal activity was still a disease throughout crime-ridden America in the era of gangsterism. Another form of early gangsters chose to express their resistance of authority by gambling. Gambling, in the form of lotteries and gaming, was hot in the South before the Civil War. By the beginning of the 20th century, the same reformers that had argued the passing of the 18th Amendment also influenced legislation to outlaw all forms of gambling. This created opportunities for yet more organized crime.
He's in the jailhouse now. He's in the jailhouse now. I told him once or twice to quit playing cards and shooting dice.
The passage of the 18th Amendment in 1919 led to a significant increase in crime rates in the United States. This increase is mainly in part to American gangsters. American gangsterism ran rampant in big cities throughout the 1920s. There were large amounts of money behind alcohol distribution at the time because of the high demand for its consumption. Organized crime in the United States began with gambling and prostitution, but Prohibition allowed the gangsters to capitalize on selling the now outlawed alcohol. The most prominent of these gangs was the Chicago Outfit, also known as the Chicago Mafia. The Chicago Outfit began their organized crime in the early 1900s after an increase in Italian immigration to the U.S. Al Capone is the most well-known gangster of the bunch, and the Chicago Outfit was his gang. But Al was not the first big leader. Big Jim Colosimo was the first boss. Jim was followed by Johnny Torino, who brought Capone to Chicago. Once Capone showed up to town, the dirty business of the Chicago Outfit began. Capone helped run the outfit's widespread bootlegging business, and he sold the alcohol at the speakeasies he owned throughout the city. Capone's control over the outfit had major ramifications in the political arena. As Frederick Lewis Allen said in his article, Only Yesterday,
as the profits from beer and alky cooking rolled in, young Capone acquired more finesse, particularly finesse in the management of politics and politicians. By the middle of the decade, he had gained complete control of the suburb of Cicero and had installed his own mayor in office.
The public knew what these gangsters were doing. They just let it happen. There was nothing the government could do because of the political problem. Everyone in those political positions of power were looking for the gang. Capone's dirty work did not come without bloodshed. Most famous was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929. 4 of Capone's men were sent to kill 7 men from a rival gang in Chicago, the Northsiders. 2 of Capone's men were disguised as police officers. As Capone's organized crime made him rich, his net worth ran up to $100 million, adjusted to $1.3 billion based on modern inflation. In 1931, Al Capone was arrested for tax evasion and spent 11 years in prison. Gangsters in the 1920s brought havoc to the biggest cities in America. Gangs profited significantly off bootlegging and racketeering. The expungence of the 18th Amendment led to a sharp decline in these acts, but their somewhat dark legacy both bootlegging and other acts of gangsterism, lives on today.